No. Advantage one, its conflict resolution, tensions are high. China stepped up great zone operations in Philippine territory, priming the SS as a flashpoint for territorial aspirations. Bautista, 25. SS flashpoint had intentions removing the shoal as the creation operations to see the fact of Chinese territory, really validate China's business Beijing to reorder based on Chinese Philippines adopting direct competition with the US SS about credibility, security, territorial US, in contact with Beijing, microcosm, rivalries, Beijing, future events, unrolled law of crisis, and consequent nuclear escalation craft. Then more Chinese Philippines and nuclear trade for cheese against certain gases and total provincial conflict to the Philippines and Taiwan. Request numbers in accident, as very quickly, hell of attention to WB is 2, lazy solvency 1 is hard, immediate, and clear ratification short lines, the checks back against extension. Any alternatives are too legalistic to work hard in. To work, and identifying fixing reason to increase access to bases allows superior mass police monetization for needs law enforcement. Creating recognized president American policy against still suited funds effective righteous news of protection. Law sort of project ratification, give us grace and operation approach. Now allow benefits from the US of failing to pursue equitable policy. See how does not be the contemporary environment, self-exemption provided is too legalistically consent. Will signal renewed capability to bolster the rules-based order. 2 is soft. Becoming party boosts credibility, enables conflict resolution, and reduces reliance on escalatory vote ops. 5 and 24. Use credibility to provide such a shutout out to mean hesitant views only means matching a challenge. These government deployments without legitimacy, U.S. rights, U.S. and markets expansion, ratification, and the US, the tools needed to provide overreach and offer combating avenues, non-membership, needs credibility, we undermine leverage, man, setting with the rule of China. Since non-membership to dismiss criticism and ability to cooperate with allies, you will bear the brunt of reprisals, lack of access to this before, frustrates ability to weigh in arbitration, attitude towards status ratification led, condition to signal services, maintaining up and personal lives, when it means mentioning competition with the SS better, increasing the visual translation. Anything else to its conflict resolution, craft. 23. Russia staked out bathroom to Article 11 Canadian and Danish claims about being party legal system, unable to participate in dispute settlement, never no collective security and academic interest has been your observer. Naval power, maritime openness, cap, secure cables, and critical shipping routes and cap hotspot escalation. Patent 24. Naval power system feature the blacks of the Red Sea to the SS and Taiwan prosperity the understanding of economy, maritime connectivity, internet, and true lies on undersea cables, pipelines, commercial shipping routes, and maritime connectivity, special more China's pursuing naval might major ongoing war in the Chinese Sea Taiwan or beyond trade closures, got global nuclear wars and much community and general business security, their hope of peace or resolution. As far as continue, there's one to continue the effect of the nuclear war, the security protection attention, not just between Iran and the US Middle East, that's out all the expensive prevents out of your region and Korea, Japan history, related to these foreign countries and energy attacks, strong protection capability, US protection, marine brigades, global regulations, restricting pollution, Smith, 70, new general resolution for sustainability, close as you close for pollution regulation, continue to extract agreements of agreements by signing the US will integrate sustainable future marine pollution triggers cascading trophic collapse. Reducing pollution is humanity's only hope for survival. Trident. Playing drop due to pollution with chemical stress, maybe collapse due to the energy has seen society surviving unless actually taking place. There are less support systems for the planet. The godless change takes place. Plan. The United States ought to become party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Ratification is good and comparatively outweighs their disadvantages. One is time frame. US is only bound to follow UCLOS a month after session. UCLOS 82, Article 3 weeks for each year ratifying the Convention on Force. The 30th day following session. 2 is expert consensus. All relevant officials agree ratification is good. Meetings advised by speed, coaching, etc., which means that only the experts that have had years to come to the correct conclusion can be the most trusted. Exit 15. UCLOS ratification is supported by the President, Secretary of State, Defense Chairman of the JCF, President, Navy, Court, Coast Guard, all the living predecessors from Republican Democratic Commission. These are experts recently ratification is a great idea. 3 is uniqueness. It complies with all of UCLOS under customary law, which means this acts are non-unique. Burma, 20 UCLOS practically accepts and complies with all treaty provisions. Advantage 2 is credibility is the key gap in the decision posture, otherwise US is seen as a liability, which destroys alliances. Finding 24. Non-restricting these just government asking the others to accept ratification, building relations with other partners, expertise, inhibits ability cooperating to US cannot operate but not lose allies and needs of other files to assume US allies finance US as likely to ratification brings access to double use and the Philippines several times to allow challenge Russia joining ensures military force projecting and making the alliance commitments in East Asia, Alaska. Joining the agreement would be major benefits to trans essential for US returns to the world to implement bedrock of US force presence in Asian alliance commitments in East Asia. Any perceived wavering is commitment cause East Asian pro Harvey. Harvey 19. Alliances assemblies people critical to shirk commitment extending power loss to confidence and speaking with allies to combination South Korea and Japan have the nuclear capabilities advanced economies with nuclear power perceived wavering commitments cause allies to develop nuclear weapons that cause nuclear war. 16 nuclear reasonable nuclear programs by 20 have the ability to use nuclear missile as many as underwater in Tokyo, Japan have the technology to build a shorter ride in Tokyo, Japan nuclear. Nearby calls from standard grid developed Tokyo were to go nuclear Japan also would be in the dangerous desaling opportunities involving Japan. So Tokyo, China, similar to India, Pakistan, shapes of catastrophic conflict greatly increase independently strong alliance set in the norm for transnational cooperation, which checks the validity of existential risks. Very 20. If these events that will competition destroy institutions, destroy democracy, with extended destroying their revolutionability, shape North countries by climate connected financial crisis, ability, liberation, automation, of other upheavals, despite fault, no organizing principle comes to liberal and nationalism, and the cooperative world rights, security, the rule of law, and was unique about the liberal order, successor self-correction, for degrees, pale and present to achieve its cooperation with Japan, Europe, and the American functional diminished, crisis is at a tipping point, renewed commitment to build themselves ever shiny. 21, tipping point, development, crisis, accelerate, nuclear war, eco-class, and tech destruction, and by the catastrophe, equivalent school, culture, direction, survival, take over, require new ally paradigm, Arctic finance, and other cause nuclear war with Russia, and undermine US Canadian cooperation. Oswald 19, Russia and the US started game of chicken. In the Arctic leading military conflicts, Arctic went like result to trigger military competition, leading more to the Russian behavior to use Canadian relations. And the Russia would throw threat to sink the US ships depending on Russia's extending A2AD, and like we see believes the US is also vulnerable to ice off, based on military leaders, failure to be able to build perception tank beat, and review with violating up on the ripple effects of Canadian posture, and American Canadian dispute of the Northwestern Canadian American Canadian dispute strain, relations implication relative political trade, economic security use, launched and counter focus on nuclear after its passage, US Russia war causing extinction, far apart, 17, smoke water source only causes sustainable ozone and agricultural nuclear water drop temperature, use make it possible to go through threat extinction from other sources would be great to their use Canadian cooperation, many these existential threats, and the church health by escalation joint between US Canadian defense relations, China, active Russia, active threat, Iran, nuclear terrorist independence, climate type relation, both being more dangerous, based order, national threat, the basic adversarial states and standard of development or climate disaster, drawing researchers also by migration, public zone, technical training, war polarization, and military democracies, destroy commitments to US and Canada, strong commitments, and Russia invade Canada, boosting the US and Canadian response to right extinction. Framing. The standard is preventing extinction, however, using reducing extinction for the trauma of the future people, even while working point of this way down to the latter don't matter. Then it will be possible versions the virtual things must consider very strong reasons to reduce extinction, even though they're going to the strong reason for change to reduce extinction rates. The sense could make the future very good, but the reference SCS would be acting very wrong. Good for CA. Cool. Anything else good? Right. What is FONOPS? Freedom of navigation operations are when we deploy military vessels to determine the safety of transit passages for seas.
Cool. Why is it important to preserve safety from like hidden threats?
Well, our argument is that we should not do FONOPS because those term miscalculation, not hidden threats.
Miscalculation, how do you prevent it?
Well, our argument is that when we sail naval ships into the SCS, China perceives that as an attack, so we should stop doing that.
Right. China, why are tensions high?
The craft evidence says China is developing a nuclear triad. Forces are used against targets in the Philippines, and they deployed troops into the Taiwan question. So there's a crisis that could escalate quite quickly.
Right.
Also,
Chinese
the US has done
Chinese
things like
development-
navigation operations.
Chinese development, why is it uniquely bad when other countries like
Wait, we haven't said Chinese development is uniquely bad. Right?
Okay, so
Our argument is that the US and China have both taken a series of steps that could lead to escalation.
right,
Not that either side is
nuclear war not
particularly
possible,
bad or good.
Is nuclear war not possible in like or more likely in other like scenarios?
No, I mean, I think it's likely the Arctic with Russia, which our evidence describes. It's likely East Asia.
So why is it
with
more
Russia.
likely there, like in those places?
What do you mean? Well, we think it's equally likely everywhere, and that the risk
So
is
why do
100
we-
everywhere until you contest our specific scenario.
Why is this risk started at 100?
Because you've not contested these claims, so you should assume that warranted claims are true until contested. We say
So we should assume every claim spoken is true from when
no,
spoken.
I don't know how that'd be relevant. I think the one EC is a good idea. We've read qualified authors that describe the current climate, and we make warrants. We also think that in debate, yes.
The
if
first
we were to test
advantage,
argument,
the
it's
first
probably true.
advantage, the first advantage about hard power, like how does deterrence work? How do we, like how does
But
bad
hard
power-
evidence says we would be able to deploy Coast Guard vessels, and we would be able to end freedom navigation operations and shift to freedom navigation, which gives us the right to deploy troops if needed, but prevents us from having to escalate. Which restores deterrence because allies fear that if we can only clear seas.
As essential risk, like why does it matter? How likely is
Well,
extinction?
the Pummer evidence says it's a form of value. If we're all dead, we can't experience anything else. So being alive is flexibly prior to other things. We agree other things matter, but we think that life is a base value that must be achieved for those things.
Cool, life is a base value, that's fine.
Yeah.
I guess this like time frame stuff, like what's the implication?
Which,
Like the 30-day stuff.
well, the disadvantages would take 30 days to occur. So comparatively, the case is fast.
Okay, but that also means like UNCLOS takes 30 days to implement and like.
Most of our advantages are based on the perception of ratification and how that would clear up alliances.
Right. Perception, like why is it immediate? Why can, Like, what if?
Well, it would look like a drastic 180 from current America First policy to ratify a new treaty that has a boost.
Right, but Trump
international
has done that so many times, like, why does?
No, he hasn't. I just, I
No, he
don't think
hasn't.
Trump has 180 down America First. He's been pretty consistent. So the plan looks like differentiated.
It's one in case. Should be fun.
I will tell you when I receive it.
Cool.
Did you reply at all?
Yeah. Does anybody know where like an outlet is?
I'm not sure.
Might that be one on the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's possible I could just take that extension cord because I don't think the mic was gonna reach all the way. No,
What's that?
could I take that extension cord like down there?
Sure.
I've still.
Okay. Nails, have you got it?
Well, looks like it did. I'm good to go.
Alright. I can check again.
Oh, it was must one. You know it.
Right.
I'm good.
Civilization is structured by the ideation of matrix of violence that gains coherence by the simultaneous identification of white body, gender, style, logic, supposing it's not white exists for which one is. Uniquely represented imagine unique state of white body, white church, purpose, civilization, organization, global civil, exclusive, first body, geographies. Ability to switch out of white bodies, recognition from the ruling or the reading of white bodies, seems beyond claim remarking. Since the destiny of other bodies, the social set of the extension of white supremacy, foreign ideation, which is civilization, record, coherent, hegemony. Going to the part of the family life, strategic alliances. The concept of white supremacy, which survivors of the logic, social ways that you get attention to proportionation, which is political pattern and the anti-black civilization presently. So institutionality, physiology, genotype, and close laws humanity of other ocean, which is because the last frontier of human expansion. They, when knowing when research addressing the presuppositional foundation that there's treated that in the language of the white human, that makes research that makes it over attraction. And never push sheet 24. Takes up with conversion. It's a good measure to find these more the ocean last review abundant natural resources when we reduce the national ocean and time was even namely international that was more paradise Regular matches, ocean, they were in my areas, they were ocean, natural, universal combination, kind of universal driver, which is very, she's Atlantic nation, the nation states, no ocean long, anyway, so we're based on resource, ocean, agree, church of the church that will be like two different tendencies, the personal ocean, disorder, ocean, water, nation, see that of materiality, her sexuality, it's other different terrorists, ocean, powers, by the law, you can relate to our nation, order, just by some terrorists, so that is absolutely sort of substance, the continental of access, or when they, that must propose to say, the beginning shape of hundred, which you sort of exploitation was absolute terror source about it was funded by the deep sea beta sea. She was a pretty contributed terror and 100% of imaginary the ocean violent community. Dominated democracy ocean no longer no decision which makes it seem they're primarily monitored each other is but not good surviving for agro potentials and original source same population was pushing the source that's how fighters are really because deep sea mining to concentrate accessibility from was the living composing the ocean and has sort of like reserve on the terror so non place ready for blind legal imaginary intervention from the you hurry of come to the rendition of non-European space every land of things and you know it's really official over the land environment that if it's a physical grabbing the left you go to parents and all you remember to return the ocean that's even really inherently part of the ocean rather than the superior doing it or time weeks slowly exploited because negotiations blocked into the north side providing resources for managed for the submitting the so for the determination for which first common was really believable but the boundary extra celebration to refer to the dead ocean into the zone spectrum guard there and from beginning told the government guard the project of subjugating the ocean has always been part of the area and wild hunting for your only traversal providers who wield atomic power and have the strength to bring fire from the sky the affirmative makes yet another scientific laboratory where the project said look at against warriors with the narratives but productivity by national contribution to radiation heard 22 ocean along so you're making a lot of obviously the terror of the sea feels around the life normal degree captures which add doors and providing military sense of produce several point I've seen use don't you by those ocean something close to the laboratory and other members from the US if you're right they feel power they just like to visualize in equal historical way that's what I told you is spiritualizing motion of these transfer more to things but it's more sovereignty it's really close to labor it's not use place to transit here to be claimed personalized I think there's the wrong visual particularly use the global she had really ocean of these area can be she would have voice and words now they encounters with a specific wild laboratory show the virgin side of nuclear I know all culture is solving this with them ocean journals and indigenous species of poverty by nuclear testing with the nuclear similar symbology for the reason for the applications of experience of radiation nuclear companies of criminal application how does what's the light ocean have rival ocean called the no carbon situated within longer terms content of return middle material was the new terrors of the ocean transcend American perception of two keepers of material and work to rule off and not the 3 quarters of the planet so we typically water is being not common terms as for reference to our account equal this where we will certain operations later further the environment variety operating together transforming each of our own domesticated known ground rates and old control of the tropical colonial genre around fever nuclear age island deserting there's a ability to the basis of virtual concept of very great professional security for establishing the right property this right over ocean of property for rights to the freedom of the homes are not doing me displays these days we know their passion but the amount of liberation has the tool lands and waters and actually prepared practice and English and the fear both Russian kind of technology relation to terror to short ideas and hands in the understanding of use when this first material and replaces disposal waste like which are close to seasons up on the stretch will be voiced in the different entries all that certain ideological structures of the river forward kind of other and what is the description of a rising China repeats the same research of the regular birth we let the technologialism which forms the Asians and some human on feeding aliens whose technological sense geographic location of large population size was wet the western political order none of these structures real but instead of self-produced and anxiety sushi 20 you know for a conservation rate has the consideration of the literature combination of original culture to create the problem to authority the western writings actually have public society with tech better than technologialism so we technical marks into side of the crisis uses the digital anxiety given the single program for Japan some community and these total so that radiation progress of disorganization for different reasons here let's imagine the power of the separation power labor there's every series for a work by Chinese design different designs to surround the universe exactly science studies this creature China it's like ultimately able to follows the intersect combining the econ and technology challenge and hedge because the anti-educational aggression and nature our situation sexual cover don't fight fails to recognize the developments beyond West Valley interactions which guarantees violence 10-20 universes are always important how redemption ways to learn good actions over this provide the world in different ways from the water one is always to repeat right to have a plan of national systematic part of the soul in obviously the sort of good hospital we say very reduce more hours the constant world in the body so the systems that work is embedded part what is not so starts because our stage word permanent whole purpose in all of it forms the parts remember my original take over behind the purpose and they folded it looks part of taking microsystems being function they function or what traditional with these issues for everybody low places station of whole day or more taking over part of the work here in the daily face of our day crisis the economic ability to actual the complementary to survival together and but negative to projecting thermal tornado sort of catch by the way see where the only just how you don't know how you live in fair process of rehabilitation argument is that even if your content is valuable the one meaning which you present is violent such and must be 21 22 All the things broadcast will be freely being 100 percent related from Roger Banningers were going on equally never will live away from Roger. Not for civil problems, aggregates, for listening to visual liberty and Christian supreme order, and then control with consulate supremacy. To say don't visit Roy or trigger or go sex and Roger made this what they already pointed to. Everyone's a pirate sovereign to this environment on fires, they all holy powers, saying responsibility, simple. Evidence and keep saturation, the average state of debility and freedom, no one had educated, which is if you really state of leadership, will be honest, and one other British for right, which was okay. So we'll never since taking actual aspiration authority. There's living ways, brings an excess over minimal conditional livelihood, or chipping into other sets of conditions supporting emergency system. Presently, we see how this is singular with interest potential paradigm. First of all, to the point of engagement survival, which makes the same for Washington Federal for large word. And there's some considers how we were six, but this is better to make it the meaning such value life is necessary survival of that. But the life says you grant your server against undifferentiated magma cut further. And remember, the role is just to be frequent less wide and that the one you see conversation that takes ideological representation. That requires to culture to plan first requires keep abolition pension growth is necessary to understand that time is wide and so we discourse scheme boards and the 3-1 factor. First, if you're in the door, why does the debate we're still illuminate proper ground? Pause time really quick. The dots for it. Right, sorry. Sorry that fear. Or ground. Ground and fear losing on many tricks for debate. Time keeper wants word on that mess where the revolution wasn't given over very publicly offended word what's out. Nor is intelligible who settlers knowledge and ultimately people matter rates to the hustle dispersal we could show in persuasion of the concept of one with being hurry. This is own deceit. Words are not innocent.
Okay. Can you send marks?
Yeah.
No. Topic. Framework that should be a critical analyst of whiteness. How?
Sure, our argument is that the judge has an obligation to reject instances of like white policymaking or
Okay,
white.
wait, so the judge should just unconditionally reject policymaking?
No.
Okay, what constitutes white policymaking?
Sure.
Okay, what's your goal? Like, why vote nay?
Why vote negative? Because we have presented like a reason why the affirmative should be rejected. We think that it has real
Okay,
consequences. And that
why
the
does that mean
allegation
it's
is rejected.
Why vote nay?
Why vote negative? Because we have isolated a problem with the affirmative and voting negative deters like you. Do
How long
this
is CX?
How long is CX?
Yeah.
3 minutes, I think, unless the 20 minutes.
Will you go over?
Will I go over?
Yeah,
Like, we can,
no, like, would you?
like, sure.
Okay.
Like, if you want to ask me like 30-second more questions.
You didn't read any of the cards under top, right? Or like anything below.
No.
Will impact turn. The Bayes, that's
Yeah.
one factor, okay. The Bikini Atoll evidence of the nuclear testing, why is that bad?
Wait, the evidence? Right?
Yeah.
Sure, our argument, it's not about nuclear testing, our argument is about like
It's about like taming things through atomic testing,
yeah,
so it seems to be about like nuclear testing.
right, our argument is like the logic of like nuclear testing and nuclear war as justifications for like occupation and reasons to constrain like oceanscape imaginaries are wrong, and it like reifies the same logic of like.
Wait, so should we do nuclear testing or should we not?
No, our argument is that the affirmative has presented a scenario
so
in which
the
the
affirmative
world
said-
like blows up.
Yeah.
Our argument
So-
is that should not be a justification to
yeah,
restrict like
so-
indigenous and oceanscape.
Yeah, so let me correct you. So the affirmative said we should stop China from testing nuclear weapons on like Uyghur Muslims, and then you said that's bad. I'm just confused why.
Why?
Like why should we stop? Why should we not stop China from doing nuclear tests?
Like our argument isn't that you like shouldn't stop China. Our
Okay,
argument
the
is
one
that-
team made a series of claims
Our
about like
argument is that-
Chinese nuclear modernization and why that's bad. Why is that bad?
Sure,
Like, why
like
is that
stopping
bad?
Chinese nuclear modernization might be good, but there are parts of the affirmative.
Okay, which parts of the affirmative advocate for like an increase in nuclear weapons or like say that we should test nuclear weapons.
The entirety of it.
Okay, where, like, I don't think that's.
Like the one he sees, like even if your content says like quote, like we should stop.
Okay,
Like
so your argument is
genocide-
saying the word nuclear weapons now somehow just.
No, our argument
mandates
is that your
nuclear
desire to
weapons.
win is informed by like imagining like the apocalypse, i.e. your desire to.
Correct, we've imagined it.
Right, and you're telling the judge
How
that
can
you
you-
should, the world is going to blow up, so you should justify settler colonialism. Our argument is that it's bad.
Okay. That's, I'll start correcting it.
Just, sorry.
I'm not going. I'm just gonna read.
Sure, give me just a second to go back to the top.
The Rodriguez evidence says the white body's gratification is formed through waging war on all beings. Why?
Why?
Yeah,
Because whiteness is like dialectically defined against other bodies, i.e. you're white
okay,
if you're.
but not, you'd agree not all wars are like constituted like of
No,
white
I-
people on both sides, right?
No, but that's not our argument. Our argument is like logics of whiteness have caused all wars.
Okay.
The Hurley evidence marked it at structures to form. Sue and Chen read everything. The Penn evidence, marked it at. Actually, no, the Penn evidence, oh yeah, marked it at planetary survival. G and G, marked it at delimited zones.
The Bay evidence,
Yeah.
can you explain what it says up until it's marked?
Up until it's marked.
Yeah.
Sure. Our argument is that, like, when you assume that words do not matter in that, like, framework or like fairness or clash.
Okay, this says none of that. It says one's writing or art is intelligible only to those with specialized knowledge. A knowledge of very deeply mired institutions that have long been hostile to and disproportionately exclusionary. It is unworthy of the notoriety it is presumed to deserve. Like, can you explain this impact terms framework?
Sure, our argument is that, like, words matter, I guess.
Okay.
And that, like, institutions, like, trying to constrain it have historically been, like, racialized, gendered, and like class. White classes.
This.
The speed is unwinnable when they drop the consensus a priori. Speed times coaching experience, etc. makes debates incapable of coming to the correct conclusion, but experts that spent decades deliberating over whether or not the plan is a good idea have concluded that it is. This outweighs debating, which means that the 220 hours content is relevant because they concede this argument from the 1AC. So the plan is a good idea. Now, Chinese nuclear weapons modernization makes conflict inevitable, causes global nuclear war, which wipes out indigenous populations of literate land and causes extinction. The plan solves builds legal pressure to stop it. The case proper. Framework. Offense must be causal embedded into the plan. Infinite links are unpreparable. Kills the app and fairness while moving 6 minutes of app time. They cannot explain why they stop answering at 3 minutes across. Precious clash encourages contestation of minutia, not political strategy. Killing liberatory skills. The valve can only compensate for unfairness. Subjectivity remains dumped by wins for the case. School and family losses cause block confinement. Worst case, we get the case. Worst the critique. Solves both our offense. Alternatives cause violence against revolutionaries. With gun, no subjective information. Answers point one. Theology key to policy education. But game is terminally just debate is terminally a game that cannot come to correct conclusions, which is done above and drop from the witness. Answers point two. Bay links to that Moore's ivory tower theorizing is inaccessible to most, and the language they use is incomprehensible, which proves that their politics are not acceptable. Now, ontology, biases are malleable, not structural. Racism is linear decreasing, but politicality is key more out 24. Bias and malleable, single automatic, negative, black individual, and wasn't then when Americans put liberal negativity, intervention, link, black people, positivity, quick motion, for the launch of possible taxes, model, chase 3 million Americans, 14 years of that evidence raised, they change race by 26%, or 50 raise that to challenge, with change not, restricted white men, women, older, young, little, conservative, all move towards neutrality. The rest of the value of evidence cover nationwide change at institutional levels. Even limited progress disproves the thesis. McCarthy, 20 history, concrete evidence that Cassius and other developed timing history smooth upward chain. Yes, defeat or reconstruction, but building black institution proceeded anyways. Tools was burned black citizens rebuilt civil rights was checked, but world walls to preserve reduced. White supremacists are already law. The U.S. is vastly better than alternatives. Next in 20 U.S. and Germany converted by anti-colonial scientific is so research into resisting human fields that defense U.S. supported economies now vastly actively dismember empires. Over time, now, Soviet versus innovation force competition will prevent exit. White attack calls war center. 30 rules of direct policy more than race. Upper against change of views on race days. Liberal talks about sexual inequality now about 50 race under the rug, but solving the very problems. Astronomical equality need to be explained. Nature explains global race war, but race is not the taboo of violence. Major wars involve white people on both sides. White nations, not racial difference. Ukraine pits white people against each other. Centralized race. Annual Taiwan pits America against non-white China, but nuclear Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, India, the Philippines is about power. Germany, sales, social world. Terrible for America movement about positions about race triggered by rising power challenges. World War I, Hitler's allies, Japan, tax in England, and Germany's power was competing with the US and US start listing the wilderness within the IRA. Now drop the plan. Rebuilds liberal institutions which check out enhancing inequality solves most of their offense. Link. No civil society link. The app is advancement by gearing towards a global commons. No extraction link. It's inevitable because the Trump with the app limits it to being regulated by the globe. The third rule gets a veto over US permitting systems, which is best, and anything else is ivory tower extractionism. No nuclear link. It's about past nuclear testing. Our argument is nuclear testing bad, which is why we should stop Chinese weapon testing on Uyghur. The argument during CX was inexplicable beyond saying the word nuclear weapons bad, which linked equally with them because they talked about the crisis, which is they equally hard. No yellow peril threats are grounded about the state, and we utilize PRC in reference and not about the people. You should not conflate the two because that's racist. CCP expansion, settler colonialism, vote out, rejected. One more Chinese settler colonialism and Chinese over the defense government religiously, rich Chinese first, rich Chinese workers religiously to be humiliation, was settler colonial expansion, our country that is been our serious result of the PRC, the elimination of Tibetan culture, violent reality, will introduce into national board skills, relocation of Han in Tibet, is a strategic to eliminate Tibetan culture, other than and colonization one by Chinese nationals, visiting dishes, population did harmony, flow, population mainland to inhabitants, and one person of the PRC Chinese, but that can be seen, and massive persecution of Uyghur Muslims in possession of the PRC and well seems to be underdeveloped states Pacific Chinese work with citizenship. The plan increases alliances with Japan and other East Asian countries like South Korea by building credibility. This solves proliferation, which causes nuclear weapons testing, always their offense, and proves no yellow peril since we're advocating for alliances with East Asian countries. Voting picks our voters still be out, drop them first skew to the plan, the all to the plan, then the all to but can either can overcome links or the all fails, can't solve the case. The PRC is revisionist, so describing this such as good, they disavowed liberalism and policy making real large things they can solve none of their offense, because of double down above extinction always is infinite, and they're possible precluding incremental reform, which is dropped from the 180, which means mutual arguments are zero. Now, Turner's case is wrong. Their card is very unhighlighted. It just says white people cause war, but the work done above proves no impact to the critique, and the also just dropped an off reason to vote back. So just don't need to listen to the 200 hours video.
But now,
What the review text, the card says that the vast consensus of experts think the plan is a good idea. The one is to me the argument that debating is unable to come to the correct decision because of biases in prep speed, etc. So you should prefer the opinions of experts. The what?
Q and G,
What's the tag?
the first line.
Like what was the argument in the card? You can type against it.
It's like the who closest humanity above the ocean.
Yeah, our argument was that that form of extraction is the status quo and inevitable, so try it for solvents.
Was the plan
There was a few,
and
do both, permutation double bind, do the plan be all, do the plan be all.
the double unstoppable after it. Where after the permutations.
The no impact to the crystalline gold.
The point is that the A forward does not matter because our argument is that you should adjudicate this debate over form over content. It is not whether it is not a question of whether the plan of a proper is good or not, but whether state is engaged in the economy of whiteness and whether that is more whether that is reprehensible or not. Well, it's under critique proper. White supremacy, the logic of social organization, that dichotomy that separates the white and the other will always lead to genocide, whiteness, and dialectically opposed. And for my anti-black and separate violence, and necessitates the constant genocide of black and brown bodies in order to maintain law and ascendancy of whiteness. This is presumed to be irrational to be able to pass around government racial bodies and enslavement and colonial domination. A chemo with that indexes to white beings ascendancy or valid. To be remembered of the system of destruction of white supremacy, not just instances of it, the two-year that goes, but let me turn to permutation will not make sense because it requires disproving out these super clause claims of white supremacy. They cannot win this way where they consider the language of permutation is a link argument. If not personal health an alternative theory of the world where convinced the fundamental thesis of whiteness, they have only just said, well, they've only just they said this is wrong, but they have not proposed an alternative explanation to why the world is as it is. If you cannot explain it, then you should presume that we're correct. We'll do the we'll do the thesis proper. First, the Morehouse evidence is irrelevant. Our argument is not specific to psychological biases. Rather, it's instructional in how government and politics operate. Next, the McCarthy evidence. It does not matter. Our argument is that even if it has gotten better, it is an act of white reconstruction, i.e., the world linearly gets better for people of color. So white people can live to exploit their healthy bodies more and more often. Regardless of whether material conditions have improved, that they cannot win. That there's been a fundamental shift in governance itself, which there's no piece of evidence, and only we have read piece of evidence how close is, and an example of white governance and how it has always been an example of white governance that they do not just win progress as sort of progress happen because it is the wrong type of progress, and it only serves to bolster our arguments that whiteness is able to continually exploit healthy minorities. Next evidence, it's not just an architectural argument, it's not US bad, rather whiteness bad. It's not your evidence, it's really bad. Their only warrant here is that white people fight each other. Our argument is not that white people are the only people who cause war, rather the logics of whiteness for the perpetual war. We should think too, where the US has invaded Iraq, Iran under the pretense of nuclear weapons, and the idea of colonialism itself, which started from Europe and exploded. Even if the colonialism happened in other places, our argument is that whiteness uniquely weaponizes it and weaponizes it against people of color, which proves our thesis. Next, the framework debate. Today's knowledge with rhetorical field should provide the violent ideology as part of a larger word. Refuse their move. The good binary between the word out here and here that erase the balance. The truth is based in part of the epistemological implications of our office, but part of the plan of most creative was the center of interpretation, the role of judge. It's be critical and it's the lens of whiteness. The role of the negative should be disproved. This falls produced by the scholars of parties, specifically nature of the plan, which is all the counter interpretation makes no sense. We are specific to your plan. We are specific to your plan. One answer fairness here first. Versus their only word for fairness is basically their only word for fairness was the time constraints and how we follow them. But I literally told you across that you could ask questions over time if you want, and I would abide by it. That is tantamount to breaking the rules, but you do not ask more questions. That is not my fault. First, and on fairness forever. First on fairness and that role, two areas, very direct psychoanalysis, and whatever is formative, one area, how to fair, there's outside of control, i.e., being safe, nature, balance can never resolve the structural unfairness interest in this action, but it can serve as a referendum for rival strategies. Two, unfairness for those who extend white supremacy is good answers all the arguments on fairness. Because fairness isn't that until you start being racist, for the substance of the critique and representation come from framework, because they determine whether they framework or not. They do again any new answers because I don't have a theory nor besides trying to prove that they have good reps. If anything will lose, and fairness is some forms of fairness is necessary. Fairness is a balancing act. I.e. fairness is only good if it's used for the right purposes. Our argument is that some forms of fairness are good because it allows the subaltern's voice to be heard. On Clash, our model Saul's case, it's both for both sides of force opposite teams to little deeper policies that revalidate their research practices, and TDA teams have to deeper their policy making instruction error. I'm sure all arguments of research and Clash go both ways. It's proper. We'll concede the defense will answer the link turn. No argument, the horn evidence, no argument specific to the one you see. The fact that this wasn't your app, i.e. the fact that your app wasn't something like She Went Long's app, which was talking about users people specifically, proves our argument that whiteness will always attempt to view itself as the savior, even when reading arguments that say nuclear, that you should feel good imagining nuclear proliferation and you should use it as currency for the ballot. The link proper. We're going for Hurley. That's a nuclear proliferation link. The what is his form of scenario planning or place occupation not? They're merely displacement as literal obliteration of ties to land and water. Fear the mushroom crowd. Because it's the same purpose of progress, democracy, technology, and territorialization. The terror, the rise of the nuclear apocalypse, reshapes how we view the ocean. It's always coheres the constant nuclear territory there. That territory. You should go back to the one you see, try to find one part that does not explain the ocean through the potential for conflict or some other crisis. I can guarantee you there's not one. It proves the very lines of the link are correct. The potential for radiation to go smiling is brushed over. If everyone new kind of world making is exactly the Oasis project, the concept of self-improvement world building. That's the understood the productivity imagined. Nuclear scenarios that gave writers authority. The authority is nothing more than an experiment. This debate is their laboratory to test their figurative nukes and attempt to build their world through weighing case and investing in the spacing of the compound. The career tells you that this field is valuable and that their imagination is harmful. It's just wrong. You should take one moment to ask yourself why imagine literal bodies burning to death in the U.S. Swooping as their safety is good and valuable to any political project. If the concepts matter, then exactly not the way they presented them. That turns case on two levels. First, the link in terms of material concept of money was always strongly against reproduced for right about these claim, which we are, right? Why reconstruction problems with projects will always take space for anti-colonial violence, and their impacts like China War, Philippine War, etc., will always happen under the paradigm of whiteness. You should think about how whiteness, how warfare evolved from swords to bayonets to mass to drones. Whiteness constantly evolves. Warfare and conditions of violence and new forms that increase the reach of said violence. Listen, even if they win, that their impacts matter. Their impacts are inevitable under the paradigm of whiteness. That's the top part. The link proves that they only increase the scale of the violence. Permutations are just as competition.
The orders of the case and the critique.
In like 5 seconds.
Okay.
Okay.
The a priori is relevant, consider that it implicates how you should evaluate the debate. You should strike most of the tuner and are off because they've conceded a structural argument about how debates play out, which is that they're biased by prep time, coaching, and speed disparities. It's true that there's always uneven ground that makes debates impossible to resolve and come to a correct conclusion about, but they conceded that the consensus of experts are able to. The tuner argument about form versus content is new. The one that's not answering its argument, so you should strike it out for flow, but also presumes argumentative practices like them being able to make arguments and us being able to answer them, which we've indicted above. Now, irrelevant to that, when they drop our middle ground interpretation, which will extend below the case, is a good idea. It diffuses tensions in the SES by using legal barriers to force China to draw down modernization, else they test weapons in China, which causes the violence against Uyghur people, etc., which is their offense, and cause extinction. Now, drop extinction outweighs will be root cause, which means we have the only impact relevant to your ballot, consider it's infinite and a floor for all other value, which means beating root cause is a load and actual condition. Now, the critique. 1. Drop floating picks are voting issue, root the entirety of the 1AC, which makes being negative impossible. Most arguments. Fairness is global, but it's not assumed specific grounds. Conceded, you should drop them. Pursue because we were unable to pursue the debate. No fairness impact is irrelevant, also incorrect because yes, there is a fairness impact because debate is a game. There's no subjectivity shift, so the only impact debate is whether or not we're able to play in the game. Consider that is the most logical. The next argument is fairness is inevitable because of skew. This is relevant in other rounds, but there's no skew isolated in this debate except for floating picks, which means that this is a reason to vote. But also, even if fairness is globally, if unfairness is globally irrelevant, it's not a reason to just strike out ways to make it better. Now, the last argument was black proximity. Conceded the ballot can only solve fairness. Drop, double down. Your offense eventually results in debaters just fixing blocks, etc., which means that you cannot solve. The other thing that dropped here is the middle ground interpretation. Weigh the case in the defense of our representations. This was the bottom of the framework block, which was worst case, give us the case. This solves most of their offense, but leads to better testing. Who spreads critiques of nuance that have no actual implication of the policy and instead forces critiques of representations that impact the rest of it. It solves all their offense because it still gives them criticisms of representation, but preserves our clash offense. Their solid clash offense is incorrect because they lead to debates over minutia. Now, they conceded 2 things. 1, they leak worse to the they leak worse. They conceded that they have described the apocalypse or etc., which means that they are more invested in nuclear currency, but we are not. Even if we are, it's relevant because we'll be root cause. And the other things, the permutation to the plan and the all no impact not oscillate wide severance, which means that the alternative is not competitive to permutation to both. Either that can overcome the links or they cannot overcome links through the alternative, which means that it's risk entire die for offense. Now, root cause, it's incorrect. It's not evidence is fantastic. It basically the job. It's not racist. War is not white. It has 2 major conflicts in Ukraine and Taiwan, which pit white people against white people and non-white people against non-white people. They're to be racialized. They are naturally by the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. Asian countries are fighting China and North Korea, or white Asian countries, or white Ukraine, Islamic State is fighting Russia. This proves that war is not legitimately white, and that war can happen along other lines, which means that we should analyze things through the lens of realism, which requires voting affirmative because the plan is a good idea. This is messy, but the a priori fairness of the floating picks voting issue, middle ground dropped, permutation dropped. Linked dropped because they link harder because they describe an apocalypse. And then also no root cause because the center evidence answers this. The last argument was like colonialism, etc. But this was exported by like the Middle East, etc. to other countries. So wrong.